Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Heroine, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 252. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Candace Kade about her new novel, Augmented, the third and final installment in the Hybrid series. Augmented is a young adult sci-fi novel that picks up where the last two, Enhanced and Hybrid, leave off. Our heroine, Lee Urban, is a natural, someone born without genetic enhancements, who is fighting to dismantle the enhancement programs while trying to outmaneuver those who wish to erase her existence. Lee is someone who straddles two worlds, that of the naturals and the enhanced, but she feels that she doesn't really belong to either one. Is it possible that she is the one person who can be a bridge between them? Maybe, if she can stay alive long enough to find out. In this episode, I'll chat with Candace about her writing journey, the bittersweet feeling of writing the ending to a much-loved series, and how growing up as an expat in China and returning to the U.S. as an adult gave her plenty of inspiration for writing about her main character's struggles, as well as a few other things. Coming up. Candace Kade, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Congratulations on making it to the Three Timers Club. I think this is your third appearance on the podcast. And today I thought we could do is talk about your latest, which is the third and sadly final installment in the Hybrid series. The book is called Augmented, if you don't mind. Let's do this first. Set us up a little bit with a discussion of the series. Just kind of introduce us there. And then I think what I'd like to do is do a little brief summary of the main character. We'll discuss Lee, and then we'll ultimately end up with this third book, Augmented. But maybe introduce everyone or reintroduce everyone to the Hybrid series.
Sure. And it is bittersweet to finish it. I love this series so much, but I've also been in this world for 7 years. So I'm a little excited to move on to new projects, but I do love it. So this world is young adult science fiction, near future, closer to dystopian almost than actual science fiction, but there are a lot of sci-fi elements. And it's set in New Beijing in the year 2123, when everyone has these incredible genetic enhancements, sort of like superpowers. So some people have enhanced brain intelligence, better immune systems, stronger bones. Some people are huge and they're amazing fighters, or they can fly. So all the rich and wealthy have these incredible genetic enhancements, and then all the poor are born naturally and at a huge disadvantage, and they're stuck living in the outskirts where there's terrible pollution and crime, and it's just dangerous to be there. And so in this futuristic world, society is divided sharply by the enhanced and the naturals. And our main character, she is born a natural, but by an accident is adopted into this high society of the enhanced elite and has to hide this fact, or be very deadly for her and her family. So Enhanced Book 1 is all about her going to Peking University for the first time. There's a mysterious hacker targeting her. There's artificial intelligent games, futuristic motorcycles, forbidden love. But ultimately, it's Urban's story about trying to find her place in a world where your DNA determines your destiny. So there's a lot of themes about belonging and culture and home and finding yourself. And then book 2, Hybrid, we still get to see some of that world, but she travels to the Western Federation to try and track down her birth origins. And so there's a lot of tension in her family over that decision. And so Book two, the theme is really about family and the importance of fighting for family, even when it becomes challenging. We also get to see a little bit more of the world as we see the Western Federation. And then book three, the final book in the series, Augmented, is all about brokenness and brokenness to wholeness. And Urban is facing a lot of challenges in this book, which I'm trying so hard to avoid spoilers. So I'm kind of skirting around some of the things here, but she feels broken for reasons. And it's really her story about finding her voice again and finding how she can be a bridge between the enhanced and naturals in a way that only she can be, and how her broken background and her story is actually so much more beautiful in how she finds her wholeness again. So that's sort of a overarching view of the world and sort of the three books and some of the themes that are there.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Augmented because Lee has grown, as you've mentioned, through these books. In particular, when you were sitting down to write book three, what was important for you to share with the reader about Lee's development? Because she went from like just leaving home for the first time and always feeling a bit like an outsider, even in her own home, to now taking on the world, basically. So how do you show that character art, but still keep it like at the micro level?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it was really important for me to nail that in book three because Urban's story is really this one of straddling these two worlds, right? But her genetics are a natural, right? Like her DNA has nothing genetically enhanced about it, right? And so she's a natural genetically, but because she's been living in this enhanced world, she relates to them too. And so she relates to these two polar opposite worlds and she's straddling both and she's trying to unify them because they're so divided, right? And that's very much my own story too of, I grew up in China and I went to Chinese school and I love Chinese culture, but I am not Chinese genetically. And so I never quite felt like I fit. And then coming back to the States where I was born, I didn't quite feel like I fit either because I hadn't spent time here. And so this theme is very personal to me and I really wanted to get it right. And so in Augmented, we see just at Urban's internal journey. This is very much what she's facing. How does she straddle both worlds? And, for me, a lot of times growing up, I felt like I was not Chinese enough or I was not American enough. And I felt like I couldn't fully embrace the two cultures because I wasn't enough of them. But I think as I've grown and matured, I've realized, oh, these are both significant cultures to me and part of my life. And I can embrace both of these. And, even as an adult today, I speak Mandarin to my boys, even though I live in American and I love celebrating Chinese New Year or Mooncake Festival. And so for me, I've realized, there are pieces that I may still miss out on American culture. I mispronounce things all the time still. My husband likes to correct me, correct my English. Or, Chinese things, Chinese words that I don't know either. But I can embrace both of these cultures and I can celebrate both of these cultures. And so I wanted to show that with Urban, that she can embrace both of these cultures, even though she feels like she's not enhanced enough or she's not a natural enough. And so that was sort of the internal journey. But then I wanted to show it in an external way. So book three is all about, there's actually something today called Pikes Peak or Race to the Clouds, right? Which is this incredible race in Colorado up one of the most dangerous mountains. And I wanted to take that and put it in the future and see what a race like that would look like, a high stakes race with futuristic tech. What if, the motorcycles and the bikes racing on this incredibly dangerous race course could actually then take off into the sky and fly? What would that look like? So that's kind of the backdrop for Augmented, is this highly competitive race. For reasons she has to enroll in it. It's the only way to kind of get peace and restoration between these two different worlds. And so you have this internal journey of her trying to find reconciliation and this external journey that come together in the climax in ways, again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but I really wanted to show both of those things of the stakes and how does she reconcile these two parts of herself. And they do come together both physically and internally. Again, I probably can't say more than that without spoilers.
Let's talk about crafting the book, building, world building, and building the storyline. And in particular, I'm interested in sort of two areas. One, inspirations you drew from things you know from having lived in both cultures. And then two, let's talk about, sort of the tech, the future part of the story. But going back to the first, What did you draw on? What were sort of inspirations, things that you liked from having lived in China and growing up in China, things from the US? You mentioned the Pikes Peak race. What were these things that you drew on? And did you start running out of ideas? This is book three, and you've been drawing on these two, your past lives for all of these books. Did you ever get to a point where you're like, okay, now what do I do? But let's talk about what ones you incorporated in this book this time.
So, starting with Enhanced, it was a very interesting process for me because all my other novels, if they're speculative fiction, I sit down and I do a lot of world building up front. With Enhanced, I really didn't do that. I had been back in the States working for a while when I moved back to Beijing on a relocation assignment, and that's when I wrote Enhanced. And I knew I was only going to be there for a year, and I knew it before that all my books had taken a long time to write. So I thought, I'm going to have to write this book very quickly while I'm here. So I didn't have a lot of time to world build, but it just came very naturally, just being surrounded by it. So many little details like the hutongs in Enhanced are a real thing in Beijing. There's sort of this ancient piece of China that's saved, and all around it is just skyscrapers and modern technology, but in the hutongs are just these 1 to 2 story buildings with the tiled sloped roofs, and people on sanlonchus or three-wheel carts driving around, and it's just like this ancient piece of life. And I couldn't help but think, what would this look like in the future in a truly sci-fi world? What if this little piece of history was still preserved? And so that's something that plays actually a big role in each of the books, but it's a world building detail that just came to me because I was living there and I experienced it and I saw it. And so much of Enhanced really just came to me while I was living there. I didn't have to think about it or really plan it out. And then the other two books, Hybrid being set in the Western Federation, a lot of that book is very much in a futuristic Texas, which is where I was living when I wrote it at the time. And then the third book is actually set in Sichuan, New Sichuan, a futuristic Sichuan, which is where I grew up and have spent the most time and where I really consider home. So for the world building, how do I keep it a little bit interesting and unique for myself? As I do like to change the location a little bit in each book, just so we get to see a broader view of the world. And it does give my brain more of a chance to explore and do new world building because I love that piece of it. So I think part of it is just changing the locations based on places I've lived. But then, yeah, if I'm living there, a lot of times those details just come so naturally. And so I haven't actually done, in terms of like culture, I haven't done that much world building, just kind of naturally comes in.
Well, let's talk about the futuristic, because you mentioned the places that you've set the story are based on real places, and then you have to ramp it up for a more futuristic version of it. So when you were writing book one and then leaping ahead now to book three, how much has changed in terms of real tech and real plans, things that are in the works? Were there things that you were thinking of back then and you thought, well, this is a long way off if we ever do this, and then suddenly, oh, actually it's not so far off? Well, did that ever happen?
Yes, yeah. I think the two closest ones are CRISPR gene editing technology, which I based my book off of, which when I had started writing it was just something very out in the future. If I talk to people about it, most people had never even heard of it, versus now, I think they're going like their 35th annual summit to talk about, scientists from around the world. What is ethical? What are we doing on this front? It's advanced so much now. About 50% of people I talk to have actually heard of CRISPR. So that's interesting just to see that taking off and becoming more and more of a reality. And then the other one is AI. I wrote AI into my book, and at the time, it was just very much people in tech were talking about it, and that was about it. Versus, now obviously it's a huge hot button topic. Everyone is talking about it. But even then, I turned my manuscript for book three and gosh, over a year ago. And so even a year ago, AI has changed so much even then. And so, thinking back, if I was starting the series now, how I wrote AI would probably be different even now. And even in book three, I think there were moments when I was thinking about how I had already used AI in the book and how just what I'm seeing now, I probably would have changed some things. But at that point, the world was established, the tech was established. And so I didn't really have a chance to do that. But yeah, I think those are probably the two pieces of tech that have changed the most since I first started writing about 7 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, and since you brought it up, let's talk about that. This idea that you've written a series, I'm sure there are some lessons learned from having written it. If you were to tackle another series, and we can get to works in progress later, so let's assume for a moment it's theoretical. If you're going to tackle another series, what would you do differently, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's particularly relevant because I am tackling a new series and I love trilogies. I think that's my jam. So I think the thing I would do differently is outline each of the books a little bit more meticulously. I had a big picture view of where I was going, but again, because I was only in Beijing for a year, I didn't have as much time to do all the world building and plotting and internal arcs, external arcs, romantic beats, all the things that go into a book, right? I just kind of jumped into it. It was also my second book that I'd ever written at the time. So I was still, you learn a lot from that first book, but you also learn a lot from that second book. And so I feel like I jumped into it and I just had to do so much rework in the editing process. And so I feel like each book has gotten a little bit better. But I also feel like book three, Augmented, was so challenging to wrap up all the threads and all the people and all the relationships and arcs and yeah, themes. And man, there's just so much to wrap up. And so I think this time I definitely want to be a little bit more conscious about book three. How am I going to wrap everything up? Which, granted, there's so much when you write the first book. I think I'm a little bit of a planner and a pantster a little bit. So there are a lot of things in the first book that you just can't anticipate. New characters who decide they need to be there, new themes and arcs. And so you can't plan it all, right? Some of it you're just going to have to figure it out in book three. But I do want to be more conscious about the internal, external arcs, the themes, and the romantic beats. I want to have all of this planned in each book as much as is possible.
Yeah. For this next series, do you plan all of the books and then start writing, or do you just plan book one and tackle it first?
I like to have all three planned out.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's a lot of work before you even start drafting.
Well, my rough draft is very loose. I follow
Okay.
the Save the Cat novel, Save the Cat Writes a Novel method. And so I just have like one sentence. I'm not, 10,000 words for each beat or anything like that. It's just very rough draft. I just want to know where's my plot at? Do I have a loose plot? And then I can backtrack into what is the character's growth? What are the romantic beats? So it's not as in-depth as it sounds.
Right, right. So I imagine book three then, Augmented, as you mentioned, you were having to wrap it up a bit, again, sort of like herding cats, right? Everybody had gone off and done all these crazy things, and now you have to bring them all back into the fold.
Yes. Yep.
Gather them up again. Where there are times when you're like, why did I think that was a good idea in book one or book two? Or
That was my whole experience with book three. Why did I think all these shiny new ideas and characters and subplots were a good idea? Oh yes, absolutely.
was there ever a moment where you thought maybe I'm going to need a book four?
No,
Okay.
I feel like I was just at that point, I was like, no, it's just gonna grow with each book that I write. So it's gonna be, yes, it will be a problem for future Candace, but future Candace will regret this decision. So no,
She'll
I was
figure it
very, I was very motivated to wrap it up in book three, or it would just grow. There'd be more cats to herd for sure.
Let's talk about your new series, if you can, just a little bit, because I'm curious, one, if you can give us a little insight into what it's about. And then let's sort of compare and contrast so far your experiences between the two.
Yeah, so I've just started on my new series. I have the rough outline for all three books, and then I'm about 10,000 words into book one. So very, very beginning, bare bones. But this is young adult fantasy, and it's in the vein of like Red Queen, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Gosh, what are some of the other books that are like A Kinder Poison, sort of that, almost a little bit dystopian almost. But I'm so excited for it, and it's fun to get to go back to fantasy. I'm actually a fantasy author. I have no idea how I went off the deep end and wrote sci-fi. It just sort of happened. I never planned for that. But I do thinking about like long term my career. What do I want to write? How do I keep my readers along? I don't want to get pigeonholed into sci-fi because I love fantasy too. So I'm sticking with YA. That's my one thing that I'm gonna stick to YA. But yeah, I have so many fantasy, dystopian, other sci-fi ideas, even some contemporary ideas. But I wanted to jump to fantasy next just because I know a lot of sci-fi readers are big fantasy fans. So I think it's a good natural transition. And yeah, I really am excited to get back into the realm of battles and horses and magic.
Right, right. Do you, because you mentioned the with the hybrid series, it's sci-fi, but it's based on real places and just a futuristic version of things that we would know or might be familiar with. When you write your fantasy books, is it the same idea? Is it our world just a bit magical? You get to see sort of like a peek behind the curtain into the magical side of things, or do you prefer completely new world building, never seen before kind of reality for your story?
That's such a good question. And I would say I'm sort of in the middle. So it's
Mm.
not like our world, but in the ancient days and with magic, it's not like that prescriptive, but it's also not purely, there's not usually I don't have like elves or dwarves running around. It's people, but there might be some other magical creatures, some different systems, and usually it's a mashup of different cultures and places. And so it's not, any one place, but it's drawn from a lot of places and cultures and people.
And you had mentioned when you were giving us a summary of the hybrid series, you talked about the themes for each book. How important is that when you're crafting your story? Do you begin with theme? Do you know, okay, I want to write a story about X? Or is it a case of, okay, this is the story I want to write. And as you're writing it, you're like, oh, it's really about this. Now I see that. How does it
Oh,
work?
yeah.
Upfront or discover it later?
Yeah, I think themes is a tricky one because it's been a little different for every single book I've written.
Oh, really?
Some books I have the theme first, and the theme is just so important. I have this feeling of, this theme, I just want to convey it in story form. And so then I go about looking at what is the plot, who are the characters, and kind of backing into it. But then other ideas, I have the world building or a scene that comes first or a character. And then I'm trying to figure out what is the theme that sort of encompasses this whole story. And so it totally depends on the book. I feel like Enhanced, I was figuring out the theme as I wrote it. And then Hybrid, the theme I plotted out beforehand. And then Augmented, I think it was a little bit of me writing and then figuring out, oh, okay, this is a good theme, and then planning that out for the rest of the book. And then say for this fantasy series, I think I'm doing a lot of planning ahead of time of that theme. But as I write it, I'm realizing some of those themes need to change and evolve. And so I don't know. I feel like each book is different and the process can even change within a series.
Yeah. So surprises still surprising you even after plotting it out and starting writing.
Yes, I think that's why I've moved away from being a purely planner because my plans always change. The ending of Enhance, I had to completely rewrite it, I think 4 times,
Oh,
because
really?
one of the characters did not do as I had planned for the character arcs, just did their own thing, totally went off the deep end, and so I had to completely change the ending, 4 different times to figure out, okay, how am I going to wrangle all this and change this? And so I've gotten a little less strict with the character arcs and some of these things because I know, they might change. I might have grand plans for them over the whole trilogy, and then someone might decide to change, and that change all the themes, that change the plot. There's so many things
Right,
that can
right.
change.
How about Augmented and the series as a whole?
Mhm.
Did the ending for that stay pretty true to kind of what you envisioned, or were you getting towards the end and were like, wow, okay, didn't see that coming?
Yeah, there were definitely small surprises, and there was definitely a moment where I was trying to figure out how to connect that internal life lesson, sort of, and then the external showing of that. I struggled with that for a while, but I knew sort of the big beats of what I wanted to hit. Yeah, there were a lot of little pieces that came as I was writing it, which honestly, I feel like a lot of times it's those little details that really add to the story and really make it something you remember. And those I feel like you just can't know until you're writing the story and you're figuring out what really matters and who are the players and what are they trying to learn. So there still was a lot of surprises, but I had the sort of the big things there.
Yeah. And when you got to the end, typing way, what was that goodbye like? Because these characters had inhabited your head for a long time. Were you ready to finally send them on their way? Or was it a case of, oh, I'm going to miss having them chatting away to me?
Yeah, it was definitely bittersweet. I think it was so sad to finish, but also so relieving because I've been beating my head against a wall. Again, I said book three was so hard. So on the one hand, it was a relief. And also I think it's easier because I knew even though I'm turning this into my publisher, we're still going to have so many rounds of edits. So it's not truly gone, right? So I think there was that comfort of knowing, okay, we're still going to go through this a lot of times. And then also I've considered, would I want to write a prequel or maybe just even a short story of one of my favorite characters? So it feels like the door is not completely shut. So that also makes me feel a lot better of, I could still write stuff in that world. It's not totally closed. I think I need that. Even if I never write a short story or prequel, I just need that option to feel better about saying goodbye to that world.
Right, right. I can visit again if I
Yes,
really
it's
wanted
not
to.
truly gone. It's sort of like when you cut your darlings. I have a folder that's, I could use this later. I'm not
Right,
cutting this from the story. It's just for later. And then I feel
right,
better about taking it out.
right, right. I still saved it. It's
Right,
still
right. It's
it's
still
still
there.
tucked
I can
away.
use it at any time I need to. It's coming back someday.
So the next work in progress is this YA fantasy series. The idea for that, did that come after Augmented was done and dusted and put to bed, or was this something that's been in your head for a long time and just had to wait its turn?
Yeah, it came to me while I think I was working on Augmented. I had a lot of ideas that came to me while I was working on Augmented, shiny ideas that said,
Mm.
come chase me, don't fulfill your deadlines, go work on this, which I sadly had to say no to. And so now I'm just really excited to be in a place where I'm not on deadline. I can chase those shiny ideas. I'm only allowing myself one idea per time, or I'll just chase all of them and get nowhere. So I picked this one. It's my favorite. I had a time where I was wrestling with several ideas and it was hard to pick one, but I'm most excited about this one. And so, yeah, now I get to work on it.
And I imagine life for you has changed quite a bit from, as you mentioned, starting enhanced when you were overseas for work till now. Did the books in that series reflect sort of the changes in what was happening in your life, how you related to the characters, whether you had more empathy for them or less patience for them, that sort of thing? Did you find life creeping in?
That's such a good question. Life definitely changed a lot, from being single and dating long distance in Beijing, overseas, and working crazy hours to returning to the United States. Got married. We had COVID. I had a COVID baby. Moved to Oklahoma. Had another baby. And became a published author for the first time. Lots of huge life changes. Wife, mother, author. So life definitely changed a lot. But I think I didn't want that to creep into my writing because I had already set this story and I didn't want the characters to suddenly change and become more motherly or, just that would be weird, especially writing young adults. So I tried very hard to stay in the mindset that I had initially been in when I wrote the characters. And I feel like they are pretty true. So future writing, maybe I think I have a lot more empathy. I think I see a lot of potential for some terrifying female characters who have had a motherly experience. I'm trying not to give too much away for my future series, but I think my some of the life experiences I've had have definitely broadened my horizon for what I can write and what I've experienced and just my emotional capacity. But I definitely tried very hard for them not to impact the hybrid series.
Well, it sounds like you'll be busy for a while since you've got three books now to write. No small task.
Yes. I don't know why I always sign up for trilogies, but I do somehow. I think because going back to, I just love the world and the characters. And if I'm going to be that invested in fleshing out this world and really getting to know these characters, I want it to be for multiple books. One book
Right.
is a standalone. That's just hard for me to do.
Yeah. You might feel differently by the time you get to book 3.
Oh, I'm sure I would feel differently when I get to book 3.
You'll hit book 3 thinking this should have just been 2. A duology would have been
Right.
fine.
Right, exactly. I'll be beating myself up again.
Well, in the meantime, while we wait for the new series, where should people go to learn more about you and the books and information where you'll be, that sort of thing?
My books are sold anywhere books are available in ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook format. And then to connect with me, you can go to my website, CandaceKade.com, or I'm most active on Instagram, Candace Kade Author. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Great, great. Well, I should mention that we're recording this before your book comes out, but by the time it releases, Augmented will be brand new out. Everybody should pick up a copy and leave a review.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Good. Well, Candace, thank you very much for joining me today for the third time on the podcast. And congratulations on Augmented and finishing the trilogy. Very excited for that. And good luck with the new series. We'll look forward to that when it's ready. So congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far. Best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you. And I'm honored to be here 3 times. So thank you so much.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.